Tom.
The Football Show on Off the Ball.
With Sky, all the football you love in one place. Across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then. What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Now then, welcome along to the Football Show. If you're podcasting, you've already heard Henry Winter discussing the shambles pre-match outside the stadium. Pat Nevin is with us on the line, as is always the case on a Monday. Pat, how you doing?
Very well indeed.
We've talked a lot about the shambles outside the stadium. Haven't really talked about the football. I'm sure the shambles outside the stadium caught your eye, though. It was pretty grim, so I might get a brief word from you on what you made of it all.
The shambles did not shock me. At the the Champions League final last season in Porto, just a mess, and they got away with it. And I've been at many games now that UEFA have organised, and I can't believe, in comparison to the way that is organised in the Premier League, then they come over and take over games, and it's just rubbish in comparison. If there's going to be trouble, that's the games that are going to be trouble at. The Premier League games, much less so. Certainly things that are organised by groups that organise it all the time and know how to do it week in, week out. So, there was many problems, and I'm sure it's not a simplistic thing of just one problem. I'm sure, there was the ticketing problem, there was the fake ticketing problem, there was the fact that tickets, even the good ones, weren't being shown, there were strikes, etc. There was organised chaos by some young Parisians as well. So there's a whole bunch of things going on. But it just doesn't surprise me because, when things go wrong, quite often UEFA's organisation's involved in it, or disorganisation.
As for matters on the field, a 14th European Cup for Real Madrid. They have beaten PSG, Chelsea, Manchester City, Liverpool. It is hard to think of any team which has come through a more difficult run to win the title, and largely written off at every turn as well. And then for Liverpool this season, which seems so destined for a fair portion of it for something really extraordinary, has hollowed out slightly. So let's talk about the game then. Who did you fancy in advance?
In advance, I'd just go for the best team with the best players, and if they play at their best to win, and that would have been Liverpool for me. Yeah. I just thought, player for player, if they can bring their A game, they'll win the game. And I still think that would have been the case had they played well, but not necessarily their A game. Salah was good, but not at his absolutely best. And they were quite unlucky on a few occasions as well. But that's the deal. That's the gig when you've got Champions League finals. It quite often happens. I'm looking back at it now and thinking, had we been talking about Manchester City as winners of the competition, we wouldn't be surprised. Liverpool wouldn't be surprised. Real Madrid have won it, and well done, and no negativity from me towards them. But they're not the great Real Madrid teams of the past. It's not one of the fabulous teams. And for that, I think Liverpool will be gutted because, they knew they had a chance to win it, and they certainly did have chances to win it, but you find a way. And Ancelotti's quite good at that, isn't he? And he sees the weakness. And everybody has known all season, and probably for a couple of seasons, where Liverpool's weakness is. The two fullbacks push on, and there's a gap behind one of the fullbacks. And the most obvious one they usually aim for actually is Trent Alexander-Arnold. The reason being for that is the right centre-back, although the big man played well, but Van Dijk, left centre-back, covers really well, doesn't he? But the right centre-back doesn't cover quite as well. Whoever it is, whichever one they choose, and Trent Alexander is almost always gone, and there's a gap in there. Now, it's not undeliberate. They know what they're doing. But every team that plays against them knows that's where the gap is. And it turned out to be their Achilles heel on the right. Unfortunate for them.
Yeah. On the goal itself, it's brilliant play Modric, because Real Madrid didn't really seem all that interested in being brave on the ball at all in the first half. And then Modric decides to insist on playing a good pass forward under a lot of pressure and does so. The thing about Alexander-Arnold that would worry you is that he does steal a glance at Vinicius as the move is beginning. So he absolutely 100% knows Vinicius Jr. is outside him as the play is developing and never looks again. I said it yesterday to Ray Houghton. he's getting a bit old for that now. That's so fundamental. That's worrying.
Yes, unless your manager said your defending's slightly secondary. We'll cover in front of you. When Henderson's usually the guy that covers that area. So if he's gone or Robertson's gone, you've got a certain midfielder who has to see the danger and cover it. But when you play at that standard they played it at, and also with the technique that they've got when they use it, there was some of the more intricate moves that they built out from, because Liverpool did well to close down for 60, 70 minutes, and then it opened out a lot, and then Real Madrid were able to then play their better technical passing game. But if you do that against players such as, the Modric's, etc., they'll find the gap. They'll find out where the weakness is, and they'll eventually get it. And yeah, it was a brilliant move, but there were a number of brilliant moves they played out from the back. And given them due, as time went on in the game, and it wasn't at the start of the game, but as time went on in the game, when Liverpool couldn't quite keep up that level of pressure, they did pass through them quite a few times, and it got easier and easier. And you just got to think that Ancelotti knew that. But I still applaud Liverpool to some degree, or to a large degree, because that's the game, that's the gig. They want the fullbacks to go forward and create. And the vast majority of times, they will create more than they lose. Trent Alexander-Arnold will create more than goals that he gives away. So will Robertson. And you take that chance sometimes, don't you?
Because for a lot of the first half in particular, it worked really well there for Liverpool. Alexander-Arnold is pushed forward. Konate is ragdolling Vinicius Jr. and Liverpool have an extra man forward. Konate had a fantastic game, and Alexander-Arnold's further up the pitch and very involved. Often his delivery, ironically, of all things, let him down a touch at times. So you've no problem with that dynamic. But where the goal came from, that's not a case of Alexander-Arnold being too far forward. That's just like bread and butter of being a right back. That scenario is just one you have to deal with in a fairly uncomplicated fashion. Like I would anticipate you've been in Vinicius Junior's position many times and longing for that ball to come in. But a good right back is aware of you and will sniff out the danger.
I suppose that's why you're thinking in the terms that certain modern managers think, which is different from managers in the past. Managers in the past, it's look, get that defensive thing done. You always cover around that side. You've always get right there first, and then you can break from all that sort of stuff, which is exactly how I would expect a defender to defend, and how I would have expected Trent Alexander-Arnold to defend in that occasion. It may well be that his managers told him that's what you do when you're in that situation. But there is always that wee bit in the back of your mind that he's always been told to try and get a wee bit forward, get a little run on a player. But you don't leave players like Vinicius Junior on their own with a bit of space, being wrong side. You just don't do it. And so I would agree with your contention that without wanting to abuse Trent Alexander-Arnold, without wanting, because I don't want it, because it's not for any other reason than he is amazing what he gives you going forward. And it's a bit like, sometimes you hear Pep after they've got beat Manchester City, and you can tell he doesn't care. You can tell, no, we did everything right. There will be a certain percentage of matches that you do all the things we want you to do, but sometimes it doesn't work. And if we are negative and don't play the way we always want to play, then we'll not get the benefits of those other 19 out of 20 games. And there's a wee bit of that with Trent Alexander-Arnold as well, where, okay, we're telling you to go. And then the one time you don't go, we say, well, what were you doing? I kind of get it. But, he should have been there. And in the end, he'll know himself he should have been there. Yeah, and if he could rewind time, he would be there.
I guess the killer is in that instance as well. I mean, he was there. He was goal side. He was in a fine position, just didn't react.
He's in his wrong angle to look, isn't he?
Yeah. The predicament for Alexander-Arnold, I suppose, is that he would quite like to be at the World Cup in Qatar, and Gareth Southgate is pretty much on the record as saying that he believes these major tournaments are won primarily and initially with a stingy defence, and therefore that's why Trent hasn't featured. And I'm sure it crossed Alexander-Arnold's mind in the last 24 hours, that's another mark against me in the Southgate ledger.
Yeah, and that's why you look at Walker, and in a way that might count against Reece James as well. Reece James is a fabulous fullback. I mean, absolutely fabulous defender, but he's never actually asked to play there very often. He's usually asked to play that little bit further forward and do what Trent does. But in a different system, as a wide man in a forward midfield. But if you're the England manager and you think, right, we're going to be stingy, so which one do you go with? And you probably go for the more organised, normal defender. And that actually might work against Reece James, and it might work against Trent Alexander-Arnold. I would argue that, that kind of doesn't always win you World Cups, etc., or Euros and things like that, because these days the attacking teams are generally winning most things.
Yeah.
Generally winning most things. So I would hope, and I actually thought that was to some degree the letdown in the Euros. England, they weren't brave enough to say, right, we're as good as you lot, we'll take you on, we'll stand toe to toe, and we can attack more. I think that was his downfall then. And if I was him, I would be saying, no, look, we need to go for it a bit more.
Yeah. Look at the goal Luke Shaw scores in the first minute. Last time he ventured forward all game. I mean, if Kieran Trippier is lining up for England in a World Cup semi-final, then frankly, I don't know.
Well, but I completely agree, but then they did get quite close in the Euros. They did get very, very close. So it is one of those things. But in the modern game, at the moment, currently where we are, generally the attacking teams are winning out in the end.
And I suppose one of the reasons Van Dijk couldn't press Valverde with all that much intent for the cross is Carvajal's bombing up outside him, and so that's what it gets you. So, exactly. What do you say of Liverpool here? Like, there've been some games of late, like Spurs at home, where it felt maybe they're running out of ideas when it came to breaking down deep line defence, and so maybe that applies to Saturday. But at the same time, Pat, 24 shots is 24 shots.
Yeah, and we do remember the keeper had quite a good game, didn't he? Oh. it was world class, wasn't it, for Courtois? Yeah. I mean, generally, maybe any other keeper in the goal might not have kept him out. Any other keeper. Yeah, I'm not saying he's the best keeper in the world. He may well be, and I think the voting was he was recently. But just that extra wingspan that he's got, a couple of times it's just fingertips onto a post and things like that. And one certainly was lucky. Was it Alexander-Arnold? I think it went through and it hit his thigh. I can't remember. Anyway, from the right hand side. So it was the tiniest little millimetres that were making all the difference in that one. But yes, they had shots on target. I think one or two of them with just about any other goalkeeper ends up in the net. So in the end, really unlucky. Really unlucky. Yeah.
And it almost feels like unsatisfactory analysis to bring in things like luck or a goalkeeping performance. But it's like the Mane saved the one off the post in the first half, and there was the one where Salah took that brilliant first touch and got a shot away with his right foot with plenty of power and was thumping the ground afterwards as Courtois got to it. Yeah, well,
you said, if you're a footballer or a football fan or anything, you look back at every one of those moments and you can say that could have changed everything. It would have made it a much more interesting game to watch. I mean, it's an interesting enough game. It was a good game to watch, but an early-ish goal, preferably for Liverpool, would have absolutely opened it out, and it may well have been that Liverpool will steamroll it through. But nobody's really doing that to Real Madrid. It would have opened them up a little bit. But you also have to keep on looking at Ancelotti, and he seems to find ways. He seems to see where weaknesses are. He'll see that as well, but he'll see where team strengths are and say, right, okay, then I've got some goalkeeper here. If I'll try and keep your shots from outside the box or from decent distance, or you're being closed down very, very closely while you're shooting. And at that point in time, you're almost thinking the only way they're going to score is with a deflection. Yeah. That's luck.
Yeah.
I kind of felt, I really felt Liverpool deserved at least to get to extra time to see what they had in the tank and what else they could do. But someone like Diaz wasn't having his best game either. It was okay, but you need everybody to be at your best to win the Champions League games sometimes. And Liverpool weren't quite. They were still arguably the better team over the 90 with the amount of possession they had. Although I did see one stat, I can't remember, 50 or 60 minutes in, and it was 51-49 to Real Madrid. And that shocked me.
Right.
It absolutely shocked me. And I was like, what? Really? Because that's not the game I was seeing. But the possession that Real Madrid had was in their own half, and the possession that Liverpool had was in their half too.
And I'm sure you watch wingers closely. What was your read on Salah and Diaz, for instance?
It's really Diaz was well played on the day generally, wasn't he? You know, and it's hard for him to come in and be absolutely brilliant every single week, but he just wasn't getting his by as often as he normally was. And, you know, it's very, very tight in games like that. You sometimes have games that they flash by just too quickly, and you know you're only going to get certain amounts of good possession in good areas, and you need to make good use of them. And it wasn't poor at all, but I wasn't surprised when he was taken off. Salah, you just know what it's like. I've seen plenty of games with Salah, and it's almost sacrilege to say it. Certainly this season and bits of last season where he was bang average for 85, 86, 87 minutes. But then you watch the 2 or 3 things he does, and you go, wow, because you've seen the highlights, you've not watched the whole game, and that's Salah. And if he did score his goal there, then it would, you know, more again. So you have to accept that. He's had to control his energy exertions quite a lot for this season, because we have to remember what a season he's had. I mean, if there's anybody had more, it might have been you mentioned to me last week, the amount of disappointments that Mo Salah's had this season. I mean, they're crushing. And the fact that he never seems to get a rest, he's always playing in AFCON and various things, he did look a little bit wiped out.
A few times watching Real Madrid this season, I've been thinking about a few Manchester United players who spoke about the Champions League finals against Barcelona maybe a decade ago, and in effect they were just saying how difficult it was to maintain your composure and not become overly frustrated, because akin to Madrid now in the Spanish league, that Manchester United team spent the vast majority of their time having the most possession, being in charge of games, and not just having a defensive rearguard action. And so to suddenly not be able to get the ball just led to mistakes and people, you know, pushing things and then being picked apart. Considering Kroos, Modric, Benzema, Casemiro, Carvalho, Alaba, and bossing so many La Liga games, they've no problem playing like Burnley. And they don't seem to get rattled, or the humility almost is quite impressive.
Yes, I agree with that. It's funny you mentioned Burnley, and you look at Benzema and you think, yeah, target man, but his technical hold-up play was just ridiculously good. Yeah. It was just stupidly good against very good defenders, as drawing people little infield balls that you're thinking, if the top players in the world that are midfielders play that ball, you're applauding them. And there's your big hunk of a centre forward doing exactly that. And you're thinking, oh, he's class. He's real quality. In a way, the only thing wrong with the game was he wasn't the guy that scored the goal, because for what he's done for Madrid this season has been fantastic. But yeah, they'll get down and dirty and they'll fight for it. And yeah, they are a slightly different team. They're a different team going back to what they were with Ronaldo playing with the team, because it was so focused around him. But he wasn't one of the ones that was going to really get down and work too hard for it the last 2 or 3 years he was at Real Madrid. But the rest of them now, it's about, I don't, again, and everyone who was listening and watching, the amount of tackles that Modric made. I mean, Modric, in his age, the type of player he is, he made some superb tackles. You don't have to be tough as nails to make tackles. You just have to have good timing. And his timing with a lot of his tackles was absolutely fantastic until the space opened up, and then the creative genius and the calmness under pressure and the beginning to control the midfield started to show. And that does show you a real top class player who will do the ugly stuff. And then when the space opens up, right, okay, we'll turn into the Rolls Royce now after being the JCB.
Dave is texting, could you ask Pat about Thiago? Looked gone in the warm-up. Surely at that stage you should just pull him for Keita. Yeah, but I don't know if Keita's been in great form recently, and I don't know how much creatively he's going to give you either in comparison. You want creativity, and he's going to give you more than Keita's going to give you. And the other side of it is, give it a go. You know, you've got a number of substitutions you can make. Give it a go, and if it's not working, maybe you have to make that decision a wee bit earlier than was actually made. But you know, there are certain players, and you know, he's been, the biggest thing we've said about Thiago this season is the way he has created space, the way he's manipulated space, the way he's cruises by a player and suddenly everything's opened up a little bit. That's what you needed against Real Madrid. Absolutely, that's what you needed more than anything else.
But as you say, he wasn't really able to do it because you're right, he wasn't 100%. So I understand it's a very good point to do it. But I keep on going back to we're all great in hindsight. I don't know how many people will say it at the time, really, don't try him anyway.
Yeah.
I would have said, yeah, try him. And then if it's not working, okay, move on and do something else. Because that's what Liverpool have got. They've got a little bit of depth.
Because you think of the way he's been ghosting past players of late in the Premier League and showing off and creating space against packed defences. It does speak to the worries that Liverpool management and I suppose fans and players by extension have against those packed defences. Liverpool are just not as adept at breaking down those packed defences as Manchester City. Yes,
and that's the problem. Everyone's got, and I would say Liverpool to some degree, but they've not scored. They've scored a hell of a lot of goals this season. Remember that. So they're doing okay for scoring goals. But I've watched not just them. I've watched Chelsea doing it for a long time now. Like 75% of the play, but you can't break through those defences, and they've not got, the kind of, the magician who opens it up. There are different ways of doing it. You can be the Eden Hazard at his prime. You can be David Silva. Very, very different. But those players, and De Bruyne does it now, those players will open it up. Man City make it look easy, but Man City are weird. They're just not like anybody else. Other than, to some degree, Barcelona are the very best. So compare them to everyone else. Maybe they're still looking great at doing that. But getting through those defences and the packed defences and the well organised with good technical players, it's just damn hard. I remember, for years I remember it. As I'm speaking to you now, I'm remembering a game many years ago against Ireland for Scotland at Hampden Park, and we had a lot of ball in the final third. But I'll tell you what, with McGrath there, with all the players that were there, it was a hell of a hard thing to find even half a yard of space to get by them. It's quality players that are willing to do as you say, the hard work, but they're good technical markers as well.
There's a psychological energy that you can almost taste in those scenarios, isn't there, where defence feels, I think we're going to be okay here. Fans start to sense it. Players with the ball start to sense we're not getting through here. And it almost builds. It almost takes composure away from the team who are pushing.
It does, but if you keep on creating half chances, which they did, it lasts longer. And I think it did last quite long with Liverpool. It was maybe 15 minutes to go, and I thought, I think you've run out now.
Yeah.
I think you've run out of juice now. And that's quite long to last in that sort of game where you're creating it and then you go the goal down and it's been, you feel as if you should be in the lead. But they were still creating half chances or shots and goal and the odd great save, as we know. But when they lost energy, that's the bit when playing, always noticed, and also when watching, always noticed. There's just something that happens, and you look at two or three players. It's usually a midfielder, and you can just see the body language of, you'd love to get there, but you can't. And if you're Modric playing against that or whatever, you know it. It's just inherently you don't think this is one, but you think we've got a right good chance now because they are not the power and the speed and everything that they had beforehand, because they played in a certain way, Liverpool. And by that point, it hadn't worked, and it wasn't obvious that they were going to have a plan B.
They're in such an interesting place, Liverpool, in that they're generally regarded as this great team. But in 20 years, when fathers are telling sons about that great Liverpool team, and sons will say, or daughters, of course, and mothers, what did they win? Well, look, they won a Champions League and they won the league once. But that Man City team won 12 leagues out of 14. I think there'll be like a certain scepticism, were they bottlers or how good were they? So can we call this, say Mane goes imminently and Salah goes next year, and that's the end of this team. Maybe Klopp builds another one, maybe he doesn't, but that's the end of this team. Was this a great team?
I think, it's a great team, but in terms of the greatest that Liverpool have had, again, that's a very, very good debate, because I certainly played against Liverpool teams that were, for a period, probably the best club team on the planet, and very, very difficult to find too many weaknesses in their teams. And they played actually a very good style of football back then. And as you move on, there are teams like that. Had they win the quadruple, people just talk about numbers these days. They say, quadruple, they must be the best ever, full stop. But I go back to that comment. I remember a younger Liverpool fan saying to me, they couldn't have been as good in your day, and they weren't very good, and these players are much better. And I'm going, very good. So does Kenny get in the current team? Does Rushy get in the current team? And then Souness, and you start going through it, and you think, no, in actual fact, to be called the great team of a club like Liverpool, that's really pushing it hard, because they've produced many brilliant teams, but they're up there because of the style they've played, and because they are living in an era that has Manchester City. They've got Pep, they've got that style against them, and they've got that funding against them. You got to take that into consideration.
Yeah.
It's unfair not to.
I totally agree. It's nuanced here. This is that you could be killed by the numbers, and you could just sound idiotic, but there's a lot more going on here. They are in this interesting place now. You would think, they're going to be low after that defeat, and then that open top parade yesterday was unbelievable. I thought it was like someone had like doctored footage from a couple of years ago or something. So they're all like high as kites. And then in terms of personnel, you have Klopp saying he's going to sign and continue, and he's the most important signing. What a weird build-up where Mane says there's going to be great news in a few days, everyone. It turns out the great news seems to be he's going to Bayern Munich or leaving. And then you have Salah saying, great news, everyone, I'm going to stay next year, aka I'm going to run down my contract. Yeah. And like Mane and Salah, I'm like, this is big. Diaz come in, done very well. You're not replacing those two readily.
Not necessarily, but I do hear Lewandowski's leaving. So, if they fancied a wee swap there, I think they would. There's a few Liverpool fans that wouldn't be over annoyed about it in the shorter term.
True.
But you do have to build. You do have to change. These players don't last forever. You can remember how Barca reacted when Messi left. It was the end of the world. But no, football goes on, and when Salah goes, it will have to go on. They'll have to find what they think is the next best thing, and they'll be looking around for it. It won't be an obvious replacement. And remember, when they bought Salah, he never for a moment did anyone think he was going to do as much as he's done just now. So it's up to them to actually build from that. And of course, the other thing to remember, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And in Manchester City were desperate for a centre forward. They didn't get a centre forward, and it didn't matter. So you have to be able to adapt. And they've got money to some degree. They haven't got the money that Man City have got. They've also got, I would suggest, one of the best managers there is in the business. I'm very impressed with his adaptability as times have gone on. But if he wants to rebuild, he'll understand it will take a year or two maybe. And it's going to be tough to get rid of them. But I can remember, when Suarez was up front, and when he was leaving, you think, how can they replace that front line, Sterling, etc. But they did. And in a way, it was better. So
true.
It seems upsetting, and it seems worrying at the time, but often the most common thing you say to people, when they say, oh my God, it'll never be the same, X, Y, Z has gone. So yeah, but you don't know what's coming next. And Liverpool have shown a fantastic ability of late to recruit really well.
Yes. The reason I suppose I mentioned the parade and all this stuff is you're trying to predict their appetite next year and their mood next year, and will this be buoyant? And Salah feeds into that. Is this going to be a season of a question every single week of has Salah signed a contract yet, and Klopp just going ugh, and the whole thing taking on this air of frustration? Or look, maybe Salah, because he'll be fairly motivated and he'll get a rest month in December, maybe he has the greatest season of his life and powers Liverpool on. So what do you expect from Liverpool? How do you expect them to rebound from potential quadruple? Mane staying, like this Mane thing's come out of nowhere. How do you think they will react next year?
They've reacted better every time for me than I expected them to.
Right.
And then they built the squad better. I thought, that's them gone, because they've been totally reliant, usually in the front three or whatever, and everybody knows so many of their goals come from the full-backs, etc. So that should be able to stop. And then you see a weakness, behind the centre-back, the right centre-back and the right full-back, and you think, I can see the problems there. And then they go and chase Manchester City, who have got untold millions, right to the line, right to the last day. So you got to applaud them for that and think, I'm intrigued to see it. I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does. I think there are a number of rebuilds going on, and maybe the biggest problem Liverpool have got is the other rebuilds that are going on. I mean, you stop before you say it, but Manchester United are going to be trying to get a lot of players in. Newcastle United are going to be spending a lot of money, as soon as they possibly can. Trust me, Chelsea are going to be in there as well. They're going to be well into throwing huge sums at any player. There's a very diminished market, but I think all of those three teams are going to be kicking into it so big. And I read a piece today that Manchester City are thinking of buying another 2 players. I thought, for goodness sake, give them a break. Give everybody a break. Exactly, give everybody a bit of a break. Maybe a left fullback. You're trying to find somewhere there.
Yeah.
You know what Pep's like. He'll buy a left fullback and tell him to play centre forward. But that is the kind of position that Liverpool. I believe in their abilities to build something. The problem is right now there is a massive amount more competition than there has been for quite some time.
It's true. Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating summer in that respect. We are out of time. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Speak soon.
See you. Pat Nevin with us there, as is the case every Monday. Football on Off the Ball is brought to you by Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport, Premier Sports. Back in 1 sec.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Sky, all the football you love in one place. Across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports.